Good morning. How about those amazing Solv Ed innovators, right? It's such a great way to start off our closing plenary with that amazing story of us. As lead of the Solv Ed communities, I have the pleasure to work with these younger leaders that you just heard from, who are really working to solve some really difficult challenges. It's so reassuring to see and acknowledge the hard work that they're doing every day. So now I have the pleasure to hear from another amazing voice, an entrepreneur whose passions and talents transcend categorization, but whose personality and determination perfectly capture the spirit of young leaders that we're here to celebrate. So please join me now in welcoming for a virtual fireside chat, Jamaica's first Olympic Alpine skier, live from Miami, Benjamin Alexander. So Benjamin, welcome. So good to have you here. You have a really exciting and maybe somewhat unusual story. So from DJ to entrepreneur to Jamaica's first Olympic Alpine skier, somewhat recently, which we're excited to hear about. It's really remarkable. So can you tell us, would you ever have guessed that this would be your life's path? And what do you think brought you to this point?
Yeah, no, I could never have imagined that I'd be sitting here talking to the students at MIT. As Jamaica's first alpine ski racer, as a young child growing up in England, skiing was something that just existed on TV. And I don't think there's any crystal ball that would have you beginning a sport, especially something as challenging as alpine ski racing, age 32, and then going to the Olympics at the age of 38, especially not for Jamaica. And so on this wacky life that I've had, as you said, which led me to modeling in Asia, working in finance, taking a left turn into my creative pursuits of DJing all around the planet, and now an alpine ski racer, there was a common thread, and that was cold, calculated, and rational kind of understanding of the risks that I was taking. As a high school student, I dreamed of studying at MIT, like you guys in the room. I had to settle for the Imperial College, where I studied electronic engineering. And I've always used that engineering mindset to kind of approach all of these crazy missions in life. Now, there have been many chance interactions along the way that have helped me to get here, and I think we can all look back at our lives and think of those moments that lubricated our pathways to get to where we finally got. But I was just realistic about my goals all the way along, and very good at setting arbitrary goals that just continue to compel me to pushing forward in those hard days when my body is aching from all the training, from a cracked rib, and just forcing myself to keep going forward in spite of adversity, such as the 2 years of training through the pandemic to finally qualify for the game. So yeah, perseverance is the big thing that got me here on this mission.
Amazing, yes. And I think for the young leaders that we just heard from too, very much aligns with some of their stories and their experiences. So we're talking about young people who are acting swiftly, acting strategically towards what they see to be solutions to some of the world's greatest challenges. So you've seen the world from many different angles and perspectives. What have been some of the more inspiring or urgent calls to action or movements that you've come across, and what really resonates with you in those?
Yeah, there was a real big one that impacted me personally on my mission to go to the Olympics. So a few hundred miles away from Michigan, 2 years ago, obviously the incident of George Floyd put a massive line in the sand as it pertains to diversity, fairness, and inclusion. And this had a huge impact on me. As I said, I was training in Wyoming, so not much diversity in Wyoming. I was a skier, not much diversity in skiing. And I was in an elite segment of skiing, that's alpine ski racing, where there's literally zero diversity. And that was normal. That was the norm for everyone until that moment. Almost within days of George Floyd's passing, journalists had reached out to me to try to find stories of racism in winter sports, to understand why there was not more diversity in winter sports. I had none of those stories. You can't see right now, but I'm 6'6". Maybe that's why I have no stories of racism in skiing. um, brands reached out to me to find ambassadors of diversity in winter sports. And at the age of 37, I became a full-time sponsored athlete. Now, this moment in Minnesota changed my own personal, selfish pursuit of wanting to do something difficult to qualify for the Olympics, into becoming something more meaningful, into becoming an ambassador for diversity in winter sports. And it turned something that I thought was just going to be 2 years of my life into a lifelong mission now to bring more diversity to the winter sports, to bring more Jamaicans, more nations, and just more athletes of color to the next Winter Games. Because of this moment, I already have about half a dozen athletes I think will represent Jamaica at the 2026 Games. And I'm helping many other countries follow in my footsteps. And so that movement, that issue, that incident that happened 2 years ago was a huge moment, a turning point in my life.
Wonderful, yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering if you can tell us what you can draw from your own experiences. So most recently, the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, which, by the way, not easy to get to when you started. So I just think that's so commendable. So the Olympics, you know, the spirit of sportsmanship, partnership, cooperation, also things that we've been talking about here at Solv for the past few days. Can you sort of tell us more about the Olympic lessons that we might take with us in this room as we head off into the world back to our respective countries and places? Yeah, tell us what lessons you've learned from the Olympics.
Well, the first one I can tell you is the combination of COVID plus China means no fun. The moment that I had in the Olympics was closer to the Squid Games than it was a normal Olympic Village experience. But look, you know, the IOC was founded almost 130 years ago with the mission of making the world a better, more peaceful place. And the Olympics are about excellence, the pinnacle of sports, but they're also about participation, about bringing more nations into this event. Now, one of the most memorable moments of my entire life was being the flag bearer for Jamaica at the opening ceremony and watching the 100 other countries come together in unity and in celebration of this kind of friendly competition. Now, on my path to qualification, obviously there aren't many Jamaican skiers. A lot of the smaller ski nations banded together. We pooled our resources of finances and knowledge to try to emulate some of the best ski nations in the world. And you know, one of the things that I learned on this path is that a lot of the skill sets, the specialized skill sets, tend to be concentrated in certain places in the world. So, for example, there's a strong concentration of sprinting talent in Jamaica. We still don't have an explanation for that. I can say categorically that I wouldn't have qualified for the Games had it not been for my time in Austria, one of the strongest ski nations on the planet. And I probably wouldn't have survived my Olympic run if it wasn't for the help from the Romanian ski technicians to help me tune my skis. Now, global problems require a global perspective to be solved. And the Olympic spirit is about competition, but supporting one another. And I think that the Olympics highlight our differences, but also celebrate them. And this is a strategy or a spirit that we can and should use when we're trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Oh, amazing. Absolutely. I think, you know, yes. I think everyone in this room can relate, and we so appreciate having you join us today. Even though you're not with us in person, it's been wonderful to chat with you. Perhaps do you have any kind of final remarks or comments that you want to leave with the room?
Yeah, well, I would say this. Tune into the 2026 Games. I think they're working on what's going to be the biggest story of that Olympics. I won't be an athlete again. I'm going to become the president of the Jamaican Ski Federation and help that next generation and help them be much better athletes than I could ever have been. And I found these three incredible athletes that have been ski race training for the last 10 years. They're of Jamaican descent, and most importantly, they're triplets. So I think this will be a fun story for us all to watch in 4 years' time.
That's great. Well, we will definitely be watching and looking forward to seeing more from you. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone.